Welcome, everyone. I hope it's not snowing where you are, because it just started to snow in Madison, Wisconsin. I want to spend most of our time talking about specific cases and answering questions. I think the interactive portion of this is the best and most valuable for all of you. I put together a couple of slides. It's not very long because I want to reserve enough time to talk about the rest of it. So this is mostly place setting. It may be a review for some of you, it might be new for others, but I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions about a specific Ames page and what it means, both as a grant writer, but also as someone who has reviewed several grants. So this is really our elevator pitch. We've practiced many times doing an elevator pitch and talking about our research, and we're trying to capture that in just a single page. It's the 10,000 foot view. It's really the most important part of your entire proposal. And we did a mock NIH-style grant review session at our December 25 CAIRIBU meeting. For those of you who didn't attend, typically these grants are assigned to 1, 2, 3 reviewers who review them independently, write some comments, and then get together virtually or in person to discuss and focus in on strengths and weaknesses. Generally, there's a lot of people in the room at these meetings, not just the first or second or third reviewer, but others who are assigned different grants and maybe not your own. During the time that your grant is being discussed, people who have never seen that grant before because they weren't assigned to it will be looking at it. And they might only have time to look at the specific Ames page, and it might prompt a question or an idea or some very solid support. Everyone in the room has a vote. And so you want to do your best to place set for them if this isn't their area of expertise. Make the idea irresistible. And many of you are in a training stage. You want to define why you as an individual and your institution and your mentor, all of those things together, are the right people for the job within that specific Ames page. So with regard to ensuring that your proposed research is unique and innovative, it's a good idea to make sure that it hasn't been published. So do a good job with your lit review. But I would challenge each of you to not just look through a couple of keywords, but trace your idea back. Go back in history to where it started. Find areas where there's been controversy. Sometimes that controversy isn't addressed. It hasn't been addressed. You might think it's addressed because it was written into a review article, but their actual data isn't there. So you want to be able to find the gaps in knowledge as it relates to the whole trajectory of research that is within your area. You want to make sure that your research isn't already funded. For those of you that are applying to NIH awards, you can use this tool called NIH Reporter and type in your keywords. You can use a specific Ames page, and it's going to find other grants that are similar to yours, and you can make sure that it's not overlapping. I want to spend the next couple of slides talking about this idea for an and, but, therefore, and we added an additional word on impact statement about your idea. This is a formula for you to follow, not only for writing specific Ames pages, but for writing abstracts for papers, abstracts for meetings, and even introductions for research publications. And okay, there we go. So this and, but, therefore approach comes from largely from a book called Houston, We Have a Narrative. It's written by the author Olson. And it's a formula for you to follow that is often tried and true. And I rely on it every time I'm going to write an abstract or a specific Ames page. And you're going to block your Ames page into different segments that start with and, then a but statement, then a therefore statement, then an impact statement. I just give you an example of one here. If you're writing on UTIs, you're probably going to talk about how they're bad, how they recur, how there's a risk of antibiotic resistance. You're setting the stage for what the field already knows about your research area. The next step, the next block, is to describe what's unknown about your research area. That's the but statement. We don't know why some people develop persistent or recurrent UTIs, and therefore, without knowing those mechanisms, we can't target them with non-antibiotic therapies. So that's you're framing the knowledge gap. Then you move on to the next statement, which is the therefore statement. That's what you're going to do to solve or fill that knowledge gap. In this case, maybe we say we will define the pathways that drive bacterial persistence and recurrence. And then you're going to describe the impact. If you're successful in that work, how is it going to advance the field forward? And I just wanted to show an example of this. This is a paper that was published back in 2019 from Science. But when you look at abstracts, and you can do that after this meeting, just do a quick PubMed search in your area of interest. Oftentimes, they are structured this very same way. I have the and statement written in orange, the but statement written in yellow, the therefore statement in blue, and the impact statement in pink. So if you're ever stuck with writer's block, remember A, B, T, I, and start to organize your thoughts that way, and you're going to find that they really fit together nicely. A couple other things that are important about specific aims, your aims, what you're planning to do for your research. You might have 2 or 3 main things that you want to do. They have to be independent. If you have a situation where your second research objective can only occur if you get one specific outcome from your first research objective and the first one fails, now you're stuck. Now the whole grant sort of falls apart. We call the domino effect. So we do not want to have aims that are interdependent. So some of the other things that you want to cover on these aims pages is why the research is necessary. And a lot of times we think about that in the very, very abstract, large view. Well, we're doing this research because we want to cure this disease. It might be that your research project isn't by itself going to cure the disease, and that's totally okay. We need to be realistic. I think, for example, I was thinking this morning as I thought about talking to you about this, the idea of polymerase chain reaction was a huge innovation in molecular biology. Before that, we really could not amplify DNA, cDNA, quantify gene expression, understand the molecular mechanisms of any process. That process, proposing to learn or develop a method to amplify DNA, it would have been hard to conceive at the time that it was developed that it was going to cure any specific disease, but it filled a fundamental knowledge gap within the field, which is how to understand gene expression. That in and of itself is why the research is important. And so be specific for how it advances your research field. If you're running a training grant, be cognizant of what the granting institution, the awarding institution is trying to get out of this training opportunity. In NIH training awards, F-type awards, T32s, K awards, a lot of those training grants aren't necessarily to build the next Nobel Prize winning research, but they're to provide a venue for training. If you understand why that training institute, the granting institute is giving the money, you can align your specific aim statement with their goal. So in this case, you probably want to describe in your aims page why whatever you're proposing for research is going to provide an outstanding training platform. You'll want to include a hypothesis in your aims page, and then 1 to 3 objectives. And I like to write these as testable hypotheses. As it comes to a hypothesis, you want it to be specific, objective, and committal. Oftentimes I'll read from trainees, they're a little concerned that they might be wrong. So they might say, consuming this particular drug is going to modulate or modify pathway X. And while that's true, I as a reviewer don't understand what they actually mean. Is it going to activate that pathway or is it going to inhibit it? So stick to a directional hypothesis that's testable, that at the end of the day, when you do your proposed research, you should be able to come up with a yes or no answer to that hypothesis. Sometimes we have hypotheses that are dependent. There's 2 different parts of it. I think that this one process is caused by this other process. They're linked together. And unfortunately, in some of those cases, if you develop a dependent clause, if any part of it doesn't turn out based on your research, then the whole thing is not good. So you want to make your hypothesis formulated in a way that it's independent clauses. I think this and this. Now, if one of it fails, the other one might be true and it's still worth doing the proposed research. I think this is my last slide, and there are a lot of different ways to approach specific aims pages that are unique to the funding agency and the purpose of the specific funding mechanism or award. I find that I'm having to write these in different ways depending on my objectives. And so I think it's worthwhile to search around. There's a lot of resources of people who said this is the greatest way to write a specific aim page. And you'll notice that there's some similarities, but there's also some differences. Try on a few different styles, see what works. This was my last page. As I mentioned in the beginning, some of your reviewers are not necessarily going to be assigned to your application. They might also be non-experts. Maybe they were an expert in one small part, one facet of your application and not all of it. And so we have resources that help us now to understand when we're speaking outside of a field of expertise. You can run your draft specific aims page through an AI platform. Ask it, tell me what you find on here that would be difficult to understand by a PhD or MD level scientist who's not an expert in this field. And when it flags those, you can go back and modify them in a way that will be successful. As a backup to that, I always ask somebody who's not an expert in my field to review at least my specific aims page. And specifically say, tell me what you don't understand. That's what I'm looking for. That's why I'm coming to you as a reviewer. And then you're gonna modify that. The worst thing that can happen on an aims page is that you deliver material that somebody does not understand. I revise my specific aims page. It's the first thing I write, and I revise it weekly. I would say I go through 30 or 40 different modifications of a specific aims page before I submit. That's a minimum. We want it to be perfect. If you can get your hands on the sheet that the reviewers are going to use to review your grant, it uses words. Tell me about this investigator. Tell me about the environment. Tell me about the innovation and the significance. If you can match those words, those serve as prompts for the reviewer to see that material and put it into their application. This work is significant because, oh, I see, that's my significance statement. Now I'm going to type into you make it really easy for the reviewer, and they're going to like you for that. And then lastly, if you are writing a training grant proposal, make sure that you link the research to the area in which you're seeking to get additional training. If the two are independent and there's no clear connection, it's not going to be a successful specific aims page for your purposes. And that's what I have. I'll hand it over to Greg.
Chad, I think you saw me nodding emphatically with every word that you said. And it's because I agree with every single word that you said. The Ames page is without a doubt the most important component of your grant. And I think the part where I was nodding with Chad most emphatically was I write probably 40 draft aims before I finally settle on that final version. And it is so important to get your aims sorted first before you go on to the rest of the grant, because the aims specify the question, it specifies how you're going to go about answering the question, and it provides the foundation and the framework for reviewers to understand everything that you are going to be writing about in the next 12 pages for an NIH grant, 15 pages for a PCORI. And without that clarity in your own mind, I think you're going to run the risk of not being focused and clear in everything that comes next: significance, innovation, approach. You need to have these sorted. And when I was looking at Chad's slides, the and, but, therefore impact statement, I hadn't seen those before, and I love them. And found that it aligns very much with how I've tended to structure grants and to guide mentees in their writing of grants, whether they're career development awards or first independent research award. And that's starting with what's known, and then emerging to that critical gap. That's the but. And then the therefore is that new knowledge that you're going to generate that fills that gap. And then the impact is how it ties back to human health. That's going to be really important, no matter how far downstream you may perceive that impact to be. PCR is a perfect example. A clinical trial is a more proximate relationship to human health, but there always has to be some link back to the impact. And I would say that is particularly important in sort of the evolving understanding of how NIH grants are reviewed, scored, and ultimately funded now, in that there has been a restructuring of the framework for it, with the first scored component being the importance of the grant, the old historic significance and innovation, and then the second is the rigor and feasibility. And that's your approach. It's still important to have the appropriate resources, support, infrastructure to do the work, and for you to have the requisite expertise in yourself and the team to be able to execute it. But it's really the importance that you need to establish in those aims, and then the rigor and feasibility that would be specified in each of the 2 to 3 aims. The impact to human health, I think, is really important because sometimes these funding decisions may come down to the priorities of an institution, or in this new, I can't remember what that was in the blog, but the unified structure of funding in NIH now, that there needs to be a clear link to the priorities of the institute or institutes. But that doesn't change what you do in the aims. They need to be clear, they need to be concise, they need to be compelling, they need to be understandable, and they really need to be specific before you go on to write the remainder of the grant. So I'm not adding anything to what Chad said, because he said it so well, but just wanted to provide maybe some different language that says the same thing.